Tonight we begin with a development that Kremlin insiders had feared, Western intelligence agencies had anticipated, and Vladimir Putin himself had worked desperately to prevent. A betrayal that unfolded not over months of careful planning, but in 72 devastating hours. 72 hours that shattered the myth of Kremlin unity. 72 hours that exposed fractures at the very heart of Russian power. 72 hours that may have changed the trajectory of this conflict, and perhaps Putin's grip on power itself. What emerged from within Putin's own inner circle this week crossed a line that the Russian president had believed was unbreakable. And when that line broke, Western intelligence agencies did not hesitate. They responded with precision, coordination, and devastating effectiveness, because the leaked audio recordings now circulating through intelligence channels don't just reveal disagreement within the Kremlin. They reveal something far more dangerous for Vladimir Putin. They reveal betrayal. They reveal desperation. And they reveal a fracturing of loyalty that Putin has spent 24 years carefully constructing. This is the story of how the walls finally began to close in, not from outside Russia, but from within Putin's own trusted circle. For months now, there had been signals, not official statements, not formal diplomatic communications, just signals that something inside the Kremlin was fundamentally different. Putin has been defiant, yes, but he has been increasingly isolated in his defiance. His moves have followed a certain predictability, a rhythm, almost a choreography that analysts had learned to read. But what set off alarm bells in Washington, London, and Kyiv this month was that the rhythm went silent. Intelligence officials who monitor Kremlin communications know the indicators. The sudden cancellation of scheduled Security Council meetings, the unexplained reshuffling of personal security details, the unusual movements of key oligarchs away from Moscow, the sudden disappearance of certain voices from state media, all of that went quiet, and whenever Putin goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. The inner circle that surrounds Vladimir Putin is not large. It never has been. Putin has always preferred a tight network of trusted advisors, men he has known for decades, men who owe their fortunes, their positions, and in many cases their freedom to his continued protection. This circle includes Defense Minister Andrei Belousov, Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu, FSB Director Alexander Bortnikov, and a handful of oligarchs whose wealth depends entirely on Kremlin favor. For years, this circle operated with an almost religious devotion to one principle: absolute loyalty to Vladimir Putin. Disagreements happened behind closed doors, criticism was never public, and betrayal was unthinkable until now. Early Tuesday morning, Western intelligence agencies detected what they described as an unprecedented security breach within Kremlin communications networks, including encrypted channels that had not been compromised in over 15 years. These are the kinds of communications that Putin only uses when discussing the most sensitive matters of state: military strategy, nuclear posture, or internal political threats. Intelligence analysts didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that someone inside the Kremlin was changing their posture. And when members of Putin's inner circle shift their communications patterns without explanation, even by small degrees, every intelligence agency in the Western world pays attention. The leaked audio recordings, fragments of which have now been verified by multiple independent sources, capture conversations between at least 3 senior Kremlin officials discussing what they describe as the impossibility of the current trajectory. In one recording, a voice identified as belonging to a senior defense ministry official states clearly, "He is leading us toward destruction. The military situation is unsustainable. The economic situation is collapsing, and he refuses to acknowledge reality." Another voice responds, "What would you have us do? Speak against him publicly? That is suicide." The first voice answers, "Remaining silent is also suicide, just slower." These are not the words of loyal servants. These are the words of men who have begun to calculate their own survival, separate from Vladimir Putin's. The intelligence assessment issued by Western agencies tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Briefing after briefing described the leaked audio as authentic, unprecedented. and perhaps most importantly, representative of a broader fracturing within Kremlin power structures. But leaked audio only matters if it reflects genuine divisions. Western intelligence agencies moved quickly to verify, and what they found was extraordinary. In fact, their assessment today was among the most significant we've seen since the beginning of the Ukraine conflict. Here's what we know. Within 48 hours of the audio's emergence, at least 2 senior Russian officials made unscheduled trips outside of Russia. These weren't routine diplomatic visits. These were sudden, unexplained movements. The kinds of trips that Russian officials only make when they are preparing to negotiate their own futures. Intelligence sources confirmed that one official made contact with intermediaries in a neutral country, reportedly seeking assurances about potential asylum arrangements. This is not speculation. This is verified intelligence. And it suggests that the leaked audio represents something far larger than a single disgruntled official. It suggests that Putin's inner circle is fracturing. Tonight, intelligence sources confirm that Western agencies have identified at least 5 senior Kremlin figures whose communications patterns have dramatically shifted in the past 2 weeks, including officials who had recently been elevated to positions of greater responsibility for what analysts believe was an attempt to ensure loyalty. But loyalty, it appears, has limits. The leaked recordings reveal conversations about the catastrophic losses in Ukraine that official Russian media refuses to acknowledge, the economic sanctions that are slowly strangling Russia's industrial capacity, the growing isolation of Russia on the world stage, and most damningly, direct criticism of Putin's decision-making. They discussed the military failures. They discussed the diplomatic isolation. They discussed the oligarchs whose fortunes have evaporated and whose patience is running thin. In other words, they discussed everything that Putin has spent 3 years trying to suppress, the truth that would undermine his entire narrative of strength and inevitable victory. This is what made the intelligence community's assessment so urgent. The leaked audio wasn't just embarrassing, it was destabilizing. It represented the kind of internal fracture that could cascade if left unchecked. And Western intelligence agencies, understanding that fully, moved to exploit the opportunity, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't broadcast the recordings publicly. They didn't leak them to mainstream media. They ensured the recordings reached specific audiences within Russia. They ensured that those who needed to hear them, those who might be wavering in their own loyalty, understood that they were not alone. And here's where the story becomes even more significant. Intelligence analysts now believe that the emergence of these recordings was designed to test the cohesion of Putin's remaining loyal circle after months of military setbacks and economic pressure. Someone inside the Kremlin wanted to see whether others would remain silent or whether the recordings would trigger a cascade of similar revelations. And the answer appears to be the latter. Within days of the initial leak, additional fragments of audio began circulating. Recordings from different sources, different conversations, different officials, all expressing similar themes, all questioning the sustainability of Putin's current course. You don't get that kind of cascade accidentally. It suggests coordination. It suggests that multiple figures within Putin's circle had reached similar conclusions and were waiting for someone else to move first. Former intelligence officials speaking with our sources under anonymity described the situation as a preference cascade, a phenomenon where private doubts suddenly become public once individuals realize they are not alone. But Putin has spent decades preventing exactly this kind of cascade. His entire system of power depends on everyone believing that everyone else is loyal. Once that belief cracks, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. And today, for the first time, that crack became visible. The leaked audio was not only authentic, it was distributed so precisely that it reached exactly the audiences most likely to act on it. That distribution matters because it shows coordination. It shows that whoever leaked these recordings is not acting alone. They are building a coalition. As reports continued coming in throughout the week, we learned more about the scale of the internal Kremlin divisions. Security service officials carried out unusual reassignments of personnel, forcing the relocation of at least 12 senior FSB officers whose loyalty had apparently come into question. Military commanders targeted for criticism in the recordings have been notably absent from recent public events in the last 72 hours. Oligarchs operating outside Russia reportedly accelerated asset transfers in ways that suggest preparation for permanent departure. This wasn't just internal disagreement. This wasn't just policy debate. This was institutional fracturing. This was the beginning of what intelligence analysts call regime stress. And regime stress is the one thing Vladimir Putin has struggled to manage since the invasion of Ukraine began. For every military advance Russia has made, internal pressures have countered with something that undermines the narrative of strength. For every diplomatic win Putin has claimed, economic realities have eroded the foundations of his support. The leaked audio simply made visible what had been building invisibly for months. Remember, Putin thought his inner circle was unbreakable. He thought the combination of shared wealth, shared complicity, and shared fear would keep everyone in line indefinitely. He thought that 24 years of careful cultivation had created a circle of absolute loyalty. But tonight, the exact opposite is emerging. The wealth is evaporating under sanctions pressure. The complicity is becoming a liability rather than a bond. And the fear is shifting from fear of Putin to fear of being the last one standing when the music stops. History teaches us that authoritarian systems often appear strongest in the moments before they begin to crack. The Soviet Union looked unshakable in 1988. Saddam Hussein's regime appeared consolidated in 2002. The Assad government seemed secure in 2010, and then suddenly they weren't. Putin has studied these collapses carefully. He has built his system specifically to prevent them. But the leaked audio suggests that even the most carefully constructed systems have vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities are now exposed. What makes this moment so dangerous and so potentially transformative is that the leaked audio emerged at a time when Putin is under extraordinary pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Military hardliners want escalation. They want total mobilization, tactical nuclear threats, and an expansion of the war. Economic pragmatists want de-escalation. They want sanctions relief, restored trade relationships, and an end to Russia's growing isolation. Security service leaders want stability. They want to preserve the existing power structure without the risks of dramatic action in either direction. And the oligarchs want their money back. They want access to frozen assets, restored banking relationships, and an end to their exile from the global elite. Putin is balancing these demands while simultaneously managing a military campaign that has cost hundreds of thousands of Russian casualties and produced no decisive victory. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. The leaked audio reveals that members of his own circle understand this. They see the vulnerability, and some of them are beginning to act on it. Western intelligence agencies' assessment, now circulated to allied governments worldwide, was designed to signal that the democratic world is not willing to allow this moment to pass unexploited. Officials said plainly that the divisions within Putin's circle were consistent with patterns observed in other authoritarian systems approaching critical stress points. That is intelligence community language for the cracks are real and they're getting wider. You don't usually hear that kind of assessment from typically cautious intelligence agencies unless something genuinely significant is occurring. The Kremlin's official response has been predictable: complete denial. State media has dismissed the leaked recordings as Western fabrications and provocation designed to sow discord. But the very intensity of the denial suggests that the recordings have struck a nerve. When the Kremlin ignores a story, it's usually because the story doesn't matter. When the Kremlin attacks a story with everything it has, it's because the story is dangerous. And this story is being attacked with everything the Russian propaganda apparatus can muster. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed his nation in a measured, purposeful speech tonight. He said, "We have always known that Russia's strength was built on illusion. Tonight, that illusion is cracking." He said, "The men who enabled Putin's war are beginning to understand that there is no victory at the end of this path, only destruction." And he said, "Ukraine will continue fighting. But we also extend a hand to those in Russia who understand that this war must end and who are willing to act on that understanding." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a leader who understands just how high the stakes have become and who recognizes an opportunity when he sees one. Zelensky's address was carefully calibrated to speak not just to Ukrainians but to Russians, specifically to Russians who might be listening, Russians who might be wavering, Russians who might be looking for a way out. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning for Putin. The leaked audio wasn't isolated. Along with the primary recordings, opposition-aligned Russian media outlets also published financial documents showing massive capital flight by Kremlin-connected oligarchs, telegram channels popular among Russian military personnel, circulated accounts of command failures that directly contradicted official narratives. Anonymous social media accounts increased their activity targeting specific Kremlin officials with detailed information about their personal assets and family locations abroad. All of this happened within the same 72-hour window. When this many elements move simultaneously, it means something larger is underway. Someone is coordinating, someone is orchestrating, and whoever that someone is, they have access to information that should have been completely secure. That fact alone should terrify Vladimir Putin, because it means the breach goes deeper than a single disloyal official. It means the breach is systemic. Intelligence analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Putin is preparing a dramatic escalation to rally internal support and suppress dissent through the pressure of crisis. Another is that Putin is attempting to identify the sources of the leaks through careful observation of how different officials react to the exposure. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Putin is preparing to purge significant portions of his inner circle in a dramatic demonstration of power designed to terrorize any remaining waverers into silence. History shows that authoritarian leaders facing internal challenges often respond with violence against their own ranks. Stalin's purges, Saddam's elimination of rivals, Assad's internal security crackdowns. Putin has never hesitated to eliminate those he perceives as threats. But today, the scale of the apparent dissent may have exceeded his capacity for targeted response. He can't purge everyone. He can't replace an entire generation of security officials, military commanders, and economic managers simultaneously. And if he tries, he risks accelerating exactly the collapse he's trying to prevent. What we're watching now is a test of institutional loyalty. Putin wants to see who will stand with him when the pressure intensifies. The dissenters want to see whether others will join them or whether they will stand alone. Western intelligence agencies want to prevent nuclear escalation while maximizing pressure on the regime. And Ukraine wants to prevent any outcome that allows Russia to consolidate gains and prepare for future aggression. All of these competing objectives are now colliding. The leaked audio has accelerated timelines. It has forced decisions that might otherwise have taken months or years. And it has revealed for the first time publicly that the mythology of Kremlin unity was always exactly that, mythology. Tonight, we've heard from intelligence sources who are now monitoring Kremlin communications with unprecedented intensity. They say internal security protocols have been dramatically elevated. They say at least 3 senior officials have been placed under what amounts to house arrest pending security reviews. And they say Putin's decision to restrict access to his inner sanctum is likely part of a broader effort to identify and eliminate sources of disloyalty. But the dissenters are not backing down. In fact, additional fragments of audio have continued to emerge even after the initial crackdown. Their response today, persistent, coordinated, and devastating, sent a message to Putin that he is no longer in complete control of his own narrative. And it sent a message to the watching world that change inside Russia, however slow and dangerous, remains possible. As the coming days unfold, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly the various factions within the Kremlin hope to achieve, but what we do know is that the exposure of these recordings was consequential. It shattered the illusion of unity. It emboldened those who were silently doubting. And it demonstrated that Putin's information security, the foundation of his control, has been compromised. What happens next will depend on what Putin does in the next few weeks. If he responds with mass purges, this moment will be remembered as the beginning of his regime's terminal phase. If he attempts reconciliation, Western intelligence agencies have already shown they are ready to exploit any further divisions. They have shown they are prepared. They have shown they are watching. And they have shown they are ready to respond. And tonight, for the first time in 24 years, Vladimir Putin appears to be genuinely uncertain. The Kremlin is quiet, too quiet. And when Putin is quiet, it means he is calculating. It means he is identifying enemies. It means he is choosing his next move carefully. Because tonight, Putin learned something that authoritarian leaders throughout history have learned before him. Loyalty purchased with fear has limits. Systems built on lies eventually collapse under the weight of truth. And the men who enable tyrants eventually begin calculating their own survival. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The cracks in Putin's inner circle are real. The betrayal captured in those recordings reflects genuine desperation. And the mythology of unshakable Kremlin unity has been exposed as exactly what it always was, a carefully constructed illusion now beginning to crumble. And we will be here, watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.